Mr. Sergeant at Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Boyd will serve as chaplain of the day. Representative Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, if you bow your head, let's pray. Father God, we come to you today, Lord. Father, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for life. We thank you for the privilege and honor of being able to serve our communities, Lord, in the state legislature, God. Father, we just want to lift up all those people, Lord, all those friends and neighbors and family members that we know, Father, back home, God, that are in need of healing, Father, that are in need of comfort. Father, you know their needs better than we do, Father. And I just pray, God, that you would just lay your hand on them, Lord. And Father, God, I just pray for those people, Lord, in Europe right now, Lord, in the Ukraine. Father, I just pray, God, that you would just put your hand on that situation, Lord. God, you know the solution better than we do, Father God, and I pray for that. Father, it's just a reminder to us, Lord, that our hope is in you, God, that our hope is not in government leaders or worldly leaders, Lord, that they will fail at every level, Lord. But the one thing that's constant, Lord, is that you are God. And Father, I'm so grateful for that, Lord. And I'm thankful, Father, for your son, Lord, that you sent him to die on the cross, Lord, for a sinner like me, God. I'm so thankful for that, Lord. And I pray that you will be with us tonight, Lord, as we do the people's business, God. You will give us wisdom, or the wisdom of Solomon, Lord God, that you will give that to us, Lord. And Father, that our actions tonight would be glorifying to you, Father. And we thank you in your son, Jesus' name. Amen. Face the
Representative
flag.
Boyd will lead us in Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 94 members present.
Let the journal reflect that Representatives Carr, Byrd, and Rudder are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring anyone seeking recognition. Mr. Russell, Representative Russell, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request the Sergeant at Arms to escort our guests into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant at Arms, escort the guests into the well. Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I request that the clerk read the resolution.
Mr. Clerk, read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 701 by Representative Russell, a resolution to recognize Captain Victor G. Donahoe on the occasion of his retirement. Whereas it is fitting that we should specially recognize those estimable public servants who have dedicated themselves to improving the quality of life for their fellow citizens. And whereas Victor G. Donahoe is one such estimable person who has served the good people of the state with distinction and the greatest integrity as the Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Safety and Homeland Security, and will soon be taking his much-deserved retirement. And whereas he began his illustrious career with the Department of Safety and Homeland Security as a road trooper with the Tennessee Highway Patrol in 1989, winning the promotions to sergeant, lieutenant, and captain during his 26 years with the THP. And whereas during his tenure with the Tennessee Highway Patrol, Victor Donahoe served in the Executive Protection Unit, providing security to Governor Ned McWhorter and other dignitaries as assigned. Whereas in 1995, he is promoted to sergeant in the Executive Protection Unit and continued to serve on the protection detail of newly elected Governor Don Sundquist until December 1998. And whereas from January until December 1999, Mr. Donahoe undertook a one-year assignment with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration Office Leadership Program in Washington, D.C. And whereas upon his return to Tennessee, he was promoted to lieutenant and served as the Director of Planning and Research for the Tennessee Highway Patrol before transferring to his home district in Cookeville as a troop lieutenant in 2001. And whereas in 2002, he was selected to serve as the administrative lieutenant for the Cookeville district during the administration of Governor Phil Bredesen, and in 2007 was promoted to captain of the newly created Office of Professional Responsibility, formerly known as Internal Affairs. And whereas Victor Donahoe was chosen to lead the largest CHP district, Nashville, in 2009, and in 2011, he was requested by the administration of Governor Bill Haslam to lead the newly created Inspectional Services Bureau, which consisted of Internal Affairs and the Commission on Law Enforcement Accreditation. And whereas in 2019, he was promoted to Assistant Commissioner with the Department of Safety and Homeland Security, responsible for the oversight of 5 of the department's administrative divisions. And whereas throughout his exemplary tenure, Victor Donahoe has demonstrated the utmost professionalism, ability, and integrity, winning the sincere respect and admiration of his colleagues and the public alike, and he should be specially recognized. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the Senate concurring, that we honor Captain Victor G. Donahoe for his meritorious service with the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security, commend him for his countless contributions and many good works in service to the people of this state, and extend to him our best wishes for a happy and fulfilling retirement.
Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Vic and I worked together during my time at the Tennessee Highway Patrol, and he's a close friend that I have a lot of respect for. He served in many capacities with the Highway Patrol, as you heard here today, and I'm sure that he will be deeply missed. We have a saying at the Highway Patrol: once a trooper, always a trooper. And Mr. Speaker, if you will, I'd like to request Vic to say a few words.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. First, I want to thank each of you for serving in your capacity and supporting the many executive branches of the Tennessee. Without your support, none of these branches could function, as you well know. And I was fortunate to be a part of the Tennessee Highway Patrol for 26 years, and in the department an additional 7. And it was a wonderful career. And I thank each of you that have served in your capacity and supported the Tennessee Highway Patrol and the department over the years. Glad to be here, and thank you for the honor.
Representative Russell.
Mr. Speaker, will you join us in the well for a picture, and any other members that would like to come up, join us?
Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And while I've got a second, I want to wish my brother, THP Sergeant Corey Russell, a happy birthday today. So if anybody sees him out in the hallway, make sure his much younger brother said happy birthday.
Any further welcome and honoring? Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to wish my baby girl, Allison Lambert, a happy birthday today. Y'all please put your hands together for her.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, my son is on spring break this week, and unfortunately, he thought it'd be a good idea to come up and hang out with us. That's my son, Reagan, in the back. Reagan, stand up. Y'all make him feel welcome.
Representative Calfee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a great friend and a great neighbor right up here in the balcony. Dr. Chris Whaley, he's the president of Roanoke State Community College, and under his leadership, they branched out into about 9 counties, and they came up with the middle college. And the first year, this fine young man got his 2-year college degree a week before he graduated high school, and at age 20, he was an engineering graduate of University of Tennessee. And if we'd make him help welcome, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Representative Carringer.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to recognize the 911 Board of Directors up here on my right from Knox County, Brad Anderson, who I served, and as well as another representative from Knox County. We served on county commission with him. And so I just want to say thank you, Brad, for all you do for Knox County's 911 as well as for the state. And then also I wanted to recognize Knox County's leadership class. I think there may be some up here. Go ahead and stand up. And I know they're going to tell you that they were the best class ever, but I have to say my class was the best class ever. And I know another representative in here down toward the front would probably say theirs was the best class. So I just say, if you're from Knox County and you're in Knox County's leadership, it is the best classes ever. So thank you all for being here.
Chairman Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to wish my husband, Mike Weaver, who is at home in Smith County, more than likely watching all of us live and in full color from the screen there in the living room in his chair. Honey, I wish you a most happy birthday. You're the best.
Representative Manis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My esteemed colleague from Knox County has to take on 2 groups to recognize, but I would also like to recognize the best class, second best class ever, the class of Leadership Knoxville 2022. Thank you, guys. It's great to see you all here. Thank you for being here.
Representative Tim Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome the Johnson City Area Home Builders Association to the House this evening. We appreciate everything. Guys, stand up. We appreciate everything they do to put people in fine homes back in East Tennessee. So we appreciate everything you're doing. Thanks.
Chairman Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I got 2 great weekly countyans here with us tonight. April Wright Jones, Register of Deeds, and Marcy Floyd, the weekly county trustee. And we're also representing the new District of Champions. We got 4 girls teams going to be playing in the state championship this week. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have some guests with me tonight. On behalf of myself, Scotty Campbell, and Bud Halsey, we have our Register of Deeds, Miss Sheena Ramsey in her back, and also our County Clerk, Miss Teresa Jacobs. Please make them welcome.
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're graced with the presence of one of our great former colleagues in here tonight. The criminal court clerk of Hamilton County, Vince Dean, is here with us tonight.
Chairman Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, on consent tonight, it's number 26. I am honored today to introduce you in the state of Tennessee to our hopeful next state composer laureate, Michael Couric. He's just to my left. Michael, if you would stand up and wave. This fellow's work, believe it or not, has been in 44 different countries, has been streamed in over 100 countries, and I hope, if the Senate agrees and consent, that he will be the state's next composer laureate. So let's welcome here to the floor today. Congratulations, Michael.
Chairman Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I received some really exciting news over the weekend. My grandson called me and said I would get to meet my first great-grandchild in September.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the governor, first of all, for declaring this week the Right to Work Week in our state. As you know, this fall in November on the ballot will be the constitutional amendment for our citizens to vote on that will enshrine the right to work in this state that's been around for, in law at least, for about 75 years. So I want to thank him for that and just encourage each of you to work in your own communities to promote this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to take a moment and recognize one of my favorite colleagues and favorite people in general. If you look on the board, you'll notice that there's a name missing, or a couple, but you'll notice that one name is missing, and that's Representative London Lamar, and I want to recognize and honor her for becoming our new senator for District 33. Congratulations, London.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would like for the body to welcome the Johnson County Clerk, Tammy Finner. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you.
Representative Parkinson. Pass it. Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like y'all to make welcome Tracy Westbrooks, the Obion County trustee, up here on our left.
Anyone seeking recognition? Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to order number 17 and placed on the consent calendar or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objections, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory memorializing.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That all Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory memorializing in line on the desk be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to order number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate bills 1,996, 2017, 2107, 2,350, 2,370, 2,397, 2,398, 2,427, 2,435, and 2,468 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending third consideration of their companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover. The House bills 2,896 through 2,900 be passed on second consideration and be held on the desk or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, have any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no objections filed.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? We're voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
Having received a constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Call up the first bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1765 by Representative Parkinson and others relative to causes of action.
Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1765 on third and final consideration.
Representative Parkinson moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up the First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chairman Farmer moves adoption of Amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of Amendment 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill allows for nonprofit organizations that feed and provide housing and shelter from adverse weather a hold harmless from suit while serving in this capacity unless it arises to gross negligence or willful misconduct. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Parkinson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of HB 1765 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye 71, 7 nays, none present, none voted.
HB 1765 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2251 by Representative Parkinson relative to speeding offenses. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2367.
Representative Parkinson moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2367. Without objection, so ordered. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2367 on third and final consideration.
Representative Parkinson moves passage of Senate Bill 2367 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up the First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is gives an individual that is convicted of speeding after paying their fines one shot at redemption for removing some points from their speeding record after going to a Department of Safety approved defensive driving course. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Parkinson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Moon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, if there's reckless driving involved in a 20 miles an hour over speed limit or more, does this apply?
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Representative Moon. Absolutely not. It's just for speeding. Absolutely not.
Any other questions? Any objections to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of SB 2367 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member cast their vote? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays, one present, not voted.
Senate Bill 2367 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up the next bill, Mr. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to thank the Civil Committee on the first bill that I passed, also for all of the help they helped out. And all of the members, thank you all for voting for it. Chairman Garrett, appreciate you. Appreciate you, Chairman Garrett.
Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2116 by Chairman Sapicki and others relative to evaluations.
Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2116 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Sapicki moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up the First Amendment.
House Education and Instruction Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Moody, you're recognized.
Deborah, you got a amendment.
Pardon me, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and defer to sponsor for an explanation.
Chairman Moody moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. In discussion on the amendment. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. You adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Sapicki renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor Yield. Sponsor, and I owe you an apology immediately because, during our bill review, I just didn't know what I've been told at that time, what I know now. But anyway, I've got a question when it comes. Now, these are going to be tests given to teachers. Is that correct? Tests?
Chairman Sapicki.
Well, this evaluation process, Chairman Kiesling, has multiple aspects to it. One of them could be tests. There are other options and available for our teachers.
Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to my folks back in the district, of course, they're terming these as tests. They'll have more weight and influence in these evaluations, teacher evaluations. Is that correct?
Chairman Sapicki.
Chairman Kiesling, can you ask that question again? I don't think I'm understanding your question.
Chairman Kiesling.
My question is, and again, I'm conveying that question to you from my folks back in the district. They're just saying that these tests their understanding of this, that these tests will have quite a bit of weight or influence in the evaluations, in teacher evaluations. And I apologize if I wasn't clear earlier.
Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you. I think I understand your question now. I think I understand your question now, Chairman Kiesling. So the evaluation process right now for a teacher is made up of observation, growth, and proficiency of their students. Observation right now is 50% of the score of a teacher. Growth is 35% of the score, and proficiency of the students is 15%. Okay? What we're proposing to do and fall in line with the Department of Education start to move towards the proficiency of our children is now observation percentage will drop to 40. Growth that all teachers in the state of Tennessee use right now will still stay 35. And the proficiency part will just be bumped to 25, but still allowing all those teachers the options to choose what they want for their proficiency. And also, if you're a level 4 or 5 teacher, in the bill, it says you can discount the proficiency totally and not even count that.
Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, sponsor, for that. At this time, though, I will have to be voting down on it, but I do appreciate your work and your dedication on this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor Yield. Sponsor, I'm not on education and I don't understand all you're doing, but I have had some feedback from some of my local folks. So could you just kind of tell me in general what this bill does?
Chairman speaking.
What it does is everything that the teacher has available to them right now to come up with their evaluation scores is still afforded them in the exact same position. Nothing has changed there. The only difference is we are going to start to weight proficiency of the students 10% higher and observation in the classroom 10% less. The growth that all teachers take advantage of is still the exact same, nothing changes. And the exemption that every teacher in the state of Tennessee has when they're a level 4 or 5 teacher, that exemption for proficiency will still be in there. So if you're a teacher that's a level 4 or 5 and you exercise the exemption, nothing's going to change for you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you for that explanation. Thank you.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, I'm curious about how you came to the percentage amount that you're increasing. That's based on the achievement data. You're increasing it from 50 to 60. How did you come to that 10% figure?
Representative Speaker speaking. Chairman speaking.
To answer that question by lowering observation 10 and increasing proficiency 10.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But the question is why? How did you choose lowering those and increasing that? Where did that number come from?
Chairman speaking.
Having discussions with the Department of Education, try to find a reasonable change that would start to signal the proficiency move in Tennessee for our students and not penalize the teachers at all for growth that they use to show growth in the classroom, but then also start to lower that observation. So the same number of observations a teacher will go through, the same evaluation that teachers will go through at the local level through their principals doing observation will still remain the same. But what will happen is the proficiency part, that if a teacher wants to take the proficiency numbers to help their scores, it'll be weighted a little bit more to help them even more.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So you chose those numbers based on what the Department of Education told you. Is that basically it? And it being reflective of improvement? I mean, is that essentially it?
Chairman speaking.
That and other members, other organizations that have come forward expressing concerns.
Representative Clemens.
And then finally, the bill deletes several provisions of present law that allows LEAs to decide whether or not to use that student growth data and upon the request of the teacher to comprise 100% of that teacher's final evaluation score. Why do we want to remove that component from local control?
Chairman speaking.
I believe you're mistaken. That was in the last amendment that was put back into the bill to give that latitude back to the LEAs and the teachers.
Representative Clemens.
Okay, I must have the wrong amendment in front of me, but are you saying that the LEA still has complete discretion whether or not to use that provision as 100% or 50%?
Chairman Sapiki.
Well, no, the bill would change that 40-60, I'm sorry, that 50-50 into 60-40. But how they're going to help the teachers with their observations and proficiency, that's still at the local level.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of HB 2116 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Carrier. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 68, 22 nays, 2 present, not voted.
HB 2116 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2160 by Chairman Whitson.
Well, that's 2 claps. All right. Representative Ramsey, did I see you want to be recognized, sir? Did you want to be recognized? I know you're out of order if you want to be recognized. No? All right, we're done. Chairman Whitson, at your desk.
Request to roll House Bill 2160, 2 weeks.
Without objection, roll 2 weeks. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2054 by Representative Campbell, relative to vital records.
Representative Campbell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2054 on third and final consideration.
Representative Campbell moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. I defer to the sponsor for further explanation. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Campbell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2054. Under current state law, it states that only a funeral director or an individual acting as a funeral director can start the death certificate, and hospitals and medical examiners are frequently part of the death certificate process in starting that. This ensures that hospitals, medical examiners, and funeral directors are all part of the process and has been reviewed by multiple organizations and entities. I renew my motion.
Representative Campbell renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Representative Campbell does. Go ahead, sir.
Very quickly, will this slow down getting a death certificate?
Representative Campbell.
No.
Representative Beck.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2054 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ramsey, aye. Hardaway, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
House Bill 2054 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2269 by Representative Ogles, relative to criminal justice. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2683.
Representative Ogles moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2683 without objection. So ordered. Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2683 on the third and final consideration.
Representative Ogles moves passage of Senate Bill 2683 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, under current law, a person convicted of first-degree murder for the killing of another person in perpetration or attempted perpetration of rape, aggravated rape, rape of a child, or aggravated rape of a child must be sentenced to death, life in prison without parole, or imprisonment for life. This piece of legislation removes the lesser of these sentences. It would remove imprisonment for life. It also would require that a person who tries to commit any of these crimes and commits first-degree murder shall be either sentenced to death or life imprisonment without parole. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Perfect. Representative Ogles renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2683, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Harwood, aye. Rudd, aye. Kumar, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 2683, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1847 by Representative Littleton, relative to civil liability of certain entities.
Chair Lady Littleton, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to roll that for 2 weeks, please.
Without objection, roll 2 weeks. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1884 by Chairman Rudd, relative to easement on private property.
Chairman Rudd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of HB 1884 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Rudd moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Farmer moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Rudd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this bill does is makes a minor correction to a bill we passed a couple of years ago. If you recall, we passed a bill stating that if a person knowingly sells a landlocked piece of property, they can't come back and ask for an easement later. This bill is slightly different. We overlooked one matter. For people who knowingly landlocked their land but gave themselves an easement to access, like the farm, but there's a 10-foot that lets them to expand it to 15 foot with the permission of a judge so they can run utilities to the property, and that's all it does, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Rudd renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? See none. Any objection to the question? See none. All those in favor of House Bill 1884 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 78, 15 nays.
House Bill 1884 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1922 by Representative Hicks of Washington, relative to restrictions on sexual offenders.
Representative Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1922 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hicks moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 changes the offense from renting or offering for rent a body of water used for swimming that is owned by the offender to renting or offering for rent a body of water to be used for swimming that is located on property owned or leased by the offender or is otherwise under control of the offender. With that, I move to adopt.
Chairman Kershaw moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendment.
Representative Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1922 is just adding to the provisions governing prohibited activities by registered sexual offender. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hicks renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So I just want to make sure and understand what we're doing here. So does that mean if someone on the sex offender registry lives in an apartment complex and that apartment complex rents the pool out for parties, that they can no longer rent the pool?
Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, it doesn't mean that.
Representative Freeman.
Okay.
Representative Clemens.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does this also apply to mobile swimming pools, such as those going up and down Broadway in the back of a truck? I mean, this is no left matter. I just want to make sure we're covering everything.
Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If that is owned and leased out by a registered sexual offender, yes, sir, that would be an offense.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1922 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ramsey, aye. Rudd, aye. Garrett, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, 1 nay.
House Bill 1922 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1665.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I make a motion to lay that bill on the table.
Without objection, lay it on the table. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2621 by Representative Harris, relative to children in foster care.
Representative Harris, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2621 on third and final consideration.
Representative Harris moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up the First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment corrects terminology in the bill, so I move to adopt.
Chairman White moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Harris, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2621 would have each LEA designate a foster care liaison to collaborate with the Department of Children's Services to serve as a point of contact between the foster student and DCS to address educational barriers for students in foster care and assist with resources. I renew my motion.
Representative Harris renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? See none. All those in favor of House Bill 2621 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
House Bill 2621, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2408 by Representative Byrd.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I make a motion to roll this 1 week.
Without objection, roll 1 week. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2187 by Chairman Boyd and others, relative to workers' compensation. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2437.
Chairman Boyd moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2437 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2437 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Boyd moves passage of Senate Bill 2437 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2187 is an administration bill brought to us by the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. What it does, it makes various changes to the workers' compensation law. It changes, currently there are 12 trial judges and 3 appeals board judges, and they serve different terms. Some are 2 6-year terms and some are up to 3 6-year terms. And what this does is it creates some consistency, but making them all 3 6-year terms being the maximum that they can serve. It also requires that any appeals from the final compensation hearings will proceed first to the Workers' Compensation Appeals Board before going to the Tennessee Supreme Court. Mr. Speaker, I'll renew my motion.
Chairman Boyd renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, sponsor. Any items, and I apologize, I wasn't on any of the committees that this came through. Any of these items affect the rights of the workers?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, the changes are what I said. They ultimately could go to the Supreme Court in the end anyways, but what it does, instead of bypassing that, they are required to go through the Workers' Compensation Appeals Board first, which makes sense. The other thing is there was some inconsistency between the appeals board and the trial judges. Like I said, some were eligible for up to 2 6-year terms while others were 3. The Bureau just thought it would be better to get consistency and make them all eligible for up to 3 6-year terms. That's really all the bill does.
Representative Beck.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation.
Any further discussion? Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield.
Chairman Boyd. He does. Representative Miller.
Are these judges elected judges?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, they are appointed.
Representative Miller.
So these are not judges that are actually originally elected and then appointed to these positions?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, these are appointed. In 2013, we had the Reform Act for workers' compensation. They created the workers' compensation court system, so they deal specifically with workers' comp cases, and these are those judges that are appointed in that.
Representative Miller.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2437, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Beck, breaking aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays, 1 present, not voted.
Senate Bill 2437 and received a constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2028 by Representative Hall and others relative to student discipline. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Hall, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1995.
Representative Hall moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1995 without objection. So ordered. Representative Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the passage of Senate Bill 1995 on its third and final consideration.
Representative Hall moves passage of Senate Bill 1995 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the first amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Hall, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill authorizes the school board to allow a teacher to withhold a student's cell phone if the cell phone becomes a distraction. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hall renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1995, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Breaking. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 1995 and received a constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2683 by Representative Carringer relative to early service retirement for emergency communications personnel.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2683 on third and final consideration.
Representative Carringer moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Carringer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2683 is a bill to amend TCA 8-36-308, which is the statute that authorizes early service retirement credit for emergency services, medical services personnel, police officer, and firefighters to receive retirement benefits at 25 years. This bill will add emergency communications personnel to the list of first responders who are eligible for this benefit. This bill is permissive, and 100% of the increased cost will be covered by the employer when they elect to provide this benefit to their emergency communications personnel. I am so honored to be bringing this bill, and so with that, Mr. Speaker, I will renew my motion.
Representative Carringer renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2683, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change your vote? Lamberth, aye. Bricken, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays.
House Bill 2683, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1323 by Representative Hardaway relative to criminal procedure.
Representative Hardaway, at your desk.
Thank you, Speaker. I want to hold House Bill 1323 on the desk, please.
Without objection, held on the desk. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2385 by Leader Gant relative to public contracts. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2881.
Representative Gant moves to substitute conform to Senate Bill 2881 without objection. So ordered. Representative Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2881 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gant moves passage of Senate Bill 2881 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Gant, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Gant renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Shaw.
Thank you. Our dear friend from West Tennessee, would you tell us what this bill does?
Representative Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All this legislation is doing is adding insurance producer to the list of professional services available for cities and counties to use. By adding insurance producer to the list of professional services, it allows local governments to retain these services and use a broker to find workers' compensation, liability, and health insurance in the commercial market, ultimately saving the locality money.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? See none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2881, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts their vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Holds the aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
Senate Bill 2881 and received a constitutional majority. Everybody clerk passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2169 by Chairman Powers and others relative to increasing monetary thresholds. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2169 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Powers moves passage. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Chairman Powers. Chairman Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2419.
Chairman Powers moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2419 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2419 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Powers moves passage of Senate Bill 2419 on third and final consideration. Properly second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an administration bill. This legislation increases the monetary thresholds of major maintenance projects and lease agreements. This legislation would raise the current major threshold of $100,000 to $250,000, which is approximately what the threshold was if it had been adjusted for inflation over the past 35 years. It also would raise the current lease threshold from $150,000 to $250,000. This increase brings the number of leases needed by the State Building Commission pre-approval back to approximately what it was 10 years ago. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Powers renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we're increasing these thresholds, looks like 150% and $100,000 in regards. So what does something's qualification as major maintenance require on their part? Are we limiting public transparency or knowledge?
Chairman Powers.
No, all we're really doing is kind of an adjustment for inflation from 35 years ago. It was 100,000, now it's to 250,000, but they still go through the same forms, still file the same forms for, if it was a major maintenance thing like a heating and air or for a large building or a state building. So it would still have the same transparency it had before. That hasn't changed.
Representative Clemens.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So what exactly does the term major maintenance trigger? That threshold, what is triggered once you exceed that threshold?
Chairman Powers.
Okay, once you exceed the 250,000, is that what you're asking? Okay, they would still have to,
Chairman Powers.
they would have to go through the State Building Commission at that time for approval if it went over that threshold. And that's what they're currently doing with, when it goes over 100,000, it would just raise it to 250.
Representative Clemens.
And so if they don't meet that new threshold, how does the process work? They don't go through the building commission. What do they do?
Chairman Powers.
Okay, they go through the same process that they're doing right now for anything that's under 100,000. They fill out the same form, go through the same process. All we're doing is just increasing that to 250,000.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess I'm asking what the process is that they go through right now under 100,000 that you're raising it for. That's much of my question.
Chairman Powers.
Yeah, it's just a normal procurement process that they go through right now for anything else that's under that $100,000 threshold.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? See none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2419, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change your vote? Rudd, aye. Sherrill, aye. Freeman, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 2419, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2166 by Representative Gillespie and others relative to education.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2166 on third and final consideration.
Representative Gillespie moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt.
Chairman White moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an administration bill brought to me by the Department of Education. What it is it's just a very lengthy cleanup bill. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Gillespie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Powell.
Thank you. It's my understanding there was originally some language in there to remove reporting for corporal punishment, but I believe that was taken out of this final bill. I just want to verify that that is correct.
Representative Gillespie.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Representative Powell.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing that. There were a lot of people, we passed legislation just a couple of years ago. It's very important to a lot of us to make sure we get that data. And while I do agree that we need to make sure that we do not have burdensome reporting requirements, I think that's very important information for us to get. So thank you for making sure that was taken out.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2166, amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Wendell, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, no nays, 1 present, not voting.
House Bill 2166, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2670 by Speaker Sexton, Leader Gant, and others relative to higher education.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2670 on third and final consideration.
Leader Gant moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt.
Chairman White moves adoption of amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This legislation is being brought by our Speaker, Speaker Sexton. This legislation before you today is an effort to ensure that our public universities' credible diversity efforts aren't undermined by initiatives that seek to drive Tennesseans further apart. In Tennessee, we believe that prosperity is greatly aided by progress towards unity. We reject the promotion of concepts that attempt to cast a shadow on groups of people due to factors not in their control. The divisive concepts which we are seeking to address may seem familiar to you. These are the same concepts defined in Public Chapter 493 passed last year, which were prohibited from inclusion in K through 12 curricula. These concepts are defined as such because they declare that one race or sex is inherently superior or inferior to another, declare that race or sex is a determining factor in an individual's moral character, impose guilt or anguish based on an individual's race or sex, declare that the United States is fundamentally racist or sexist. While we believe that public college students and employees should be able to decide what topics which they wish to engage in, we maintain that it should be just that, a decision. This bill takes aim at any mandated injection of adherence to these divisive concepts as a prerequisite for graduation, promotion, tenure, or to be hired. Additionally, the bill requires a survey of students and employees to assess each campus's climate relative to the ability to speak freely, regardless of political affiliation. This is to provide the legislature with a baseline of the atmosphere at our public universities to ensure individuals feel free to have their own opinion. This bill is not meant to impede endeavors that combat discrimination. In fact, its goal is just the opposite. This bill puts the necessary guardrails in place to ensure diversity efforts don't become divisive efforts. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Gant renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a whole bunch of y'all up there. I come in peace. I do have a question though, Mr. Sponsor. Does this bill in any way prohibit state or federally required non-discrimination training?
Leader Gant.
No, it does not.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, my question, Mr. Sponsor, is there's a lot of divisive things that have happened in American history and in world history. You know, whether it's the Jim Crow laws or maybe, you know, teaching children. I think this weekend was the anniversary of the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and some bad things happened as people marched across that bridge. You know, a lot of bad things happened. A lot of laws were passed in this chamber and many other chambers across this nation in the 40s and 50s that, you know, we ought to be ashamed of. So my question to you is, if those things get taught in a classroom, is that okay with this bill? You know, to teach people that, hey, you know, beating people with sticks and sicking German shepherds on people because they want to have equal rights, you know, is that wrong?
Leader Gant.
Representative, this bill does not stifle any of that free exchange of ideas and debate and discussion in the classroom. And this bill, as I just defined, only goes at the divisive concepts that I just described. That's it.
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it's the legislative intent of this bill not to try to change or rewrite history. Is that correct?
Leader Gant.
That is correct.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsor, Tennessee State University is the state's only public HBCU. its founding is rooted in students who are African American not being allowed to enroll in another school. If Tennessee State has a class in orientation talking about the school's origins, how it was founded, what laws had to be passed to create it, if a student is required to write a paper about that, is the university going to be in violation of this law if passed?
Leader Gamp.
Absolutely not.
Representative Love.
I just want to be clear that as they talk about this, if it's required and the survey is done, if a student says they don't want to do the paper, the university will not be in violation of this law.
Leader Gamp.
That's right.
Representative Love.
Thank you.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess my question goes to how do we legislate feelings? I think one of the big pieces in here that I have concern about is that feelings part. I remember in my philosophy class in college feeling incredibly uncomfortable and even some anguish at some of the topics we were discussing related to women, related to race. But we were doing it in order to understand the different types of philosophies. And it ended up being one of my favorite courses. However, what are the penalties if someone feels uncomfortable in class for the faculty? What are the penalties and the accountability that goes along in this bill?
Leader Gamp.
They have the ability to report that within 10 days.
Representative Johnson.
And then once reported, what can happen with the professor or TA or staff member?
Leader Gamp.
It's up to the investigation how it goes from there.
Representative Johnson.
You don't see any problems with someone who maybe particularly doesn't like their professor or doesn't like the grade that they're getting in the classroom, saying that they felt the discomfort or any of those things. I just think legislating feelings is a scary place to go.
Leader Gamp.
Well, as long as you don't overreach and you go into these divisive, are you saying that you want to teach these divisive concepts?
Representative Johnson.
Not teaching the concepts, but in teaching the different types of philosophy, discussions came up with both race and sex in those conversations in order to take like a particular type of philosophy like utilitarianism. And in order to demonstrate how those folks think, we were using those kinds of discussion, and it really put a pinpoint and helped you understand that topic. But it did make me uncomfortable, but it also helped me to understand the issue at hand. And so I can see that being abused. That's my concern.
Leader Gamp.
I don't have any response, Mr. Speaker.
All right. Very good. Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor yield.
Leader Gamp. He does. Representative Towns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Representative, do me the courtesy of just giving me a little brief example of a divisive concept. I'm not up on this as maybe some other people are because it's not been presented as a problem. So give me a small example of a divisive concept that is taught at our collegiate level.
Leader Gamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I've gone through 4 of the divisive concepts, and I just went through them in great detail, and it's very clear what those divisive concepts are.
Representative Towns.
Just give me one, not 4, just one.
Leader Gamp.
Declare that one race or sex is inherently superior or inferior to another. Declare that race or sex is a determining factor in an individual's moral character. Impose guilt and anguish based on an individual's race or sex. Declare that the United States is fundamentally racist or sexist. That's 4.
Representative Towns.
Unfortunately for me, I'm not in undergrad. I've never heard that being taught. Okay, from the way you articulated, I'd have some concerns about it, but I've never heard that being taught. My concern is that we teach the truth at all times, regardless. In this state or in this country, we just have to deal with the truth. And the truth is ugly sometimes, even our own families. The truth is ugly. It can be ugly, but we're better for it. Do you think that with this, that we're backing up real close to treading on the First Amendment at all?
Leader Gamp.
No.
Representative Towns.
And the fact that we're not treading on the First Amendment is something that we certainly don't want to do. However, in a world filled with erroneous information, there's a lot of bad information out today. We know that. Internet, there's a ton of it out. And you don't know what's true on a lot of it. And this is the reason I want to emphasize that we tell the truth at all times. And one of the other representatives asked about whether or not, if it's not taught properly, who's going to determine what's acceptable? Who's the gatekeeper on this stuff? Who?
Leader Gamp.
And I'm trying to find it in the, you have 10 days, as I was mentioning earlier, to report this, and they go through, okay, a public institution of higher education shall investigate a student's or an employee's complaint that a violation of this section has occurred. If at the conclusion of the investigation, the institution finds that a violation of this section has occurred, then the institution shall take appropriate action under the institution's policy and procedures.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and thank you for the explanation. In the event that we go too far in one direction, will this body or some of us that you may know of be looking to make modification if we go too far? The pendulum swings too far.
Leader Gamp.
I have no response, Speaker.
Representative Towns.
Well, I'm going to suggest that we do monitor and see exactly what happens, because we can be overzealous one way or the other. And if it goes too far, we need to make sure that we bring it back where it's proper. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I really don't get up too much, but I do need to just understand this, because first and foremost, we know we can't hide history. It don't make a difference how we try. We can't hide it, because whoever was involved in this is going to talk about it. But what I need to understand is the legislation saying that an institution can't teach racism, or exactly what is it saying? That you can't teach it, or people can't complain? Can you, Mr. Sponsor, can you answer that?
Leader Gamp. Leader Gamp.
Again, the divisive concepts declare that one race or sex is inherently superior or inferior to another. Number 2, declare that race or sex is a determining factor in an individual's moral character. Impose guilt and anguish based on an individual's race or sex. Declare that the United States is fundamentally racist or sexist.
Representative Shaw.
Well, I guess we do realize that there are races, and all races are people. I don't know, maybe this is a news flash, but white people are not the only people that are racist. I mean, there are races, and all races are people. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how you accomplish what you're trying to do if somebody want to practice that. I'm just a little bit confused, I guess, in terms of what is the intent here, because I've been around long enough to know that there's some races everywhere. And probably this legislation ain't gonna change that. That's a heart matter. But thank you for your explanation. Thank you.
Representative Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I got just one specific question with regards to Section 4A1. The provision states in part, a student of a public institution of higher education shall not receive any adverse treatment due to the student's refusal to believe or otherwise assent to one or more divisive concepts. So my question is, if a class teaches that racism exists in the country today, and they put a question regarding that on an exam, is the teacher prohibited from scoring against that student who refuses to believe that racism exists, or that some people believe that one race or sex is inherently superior or inferior to another race or sex?
Leader Gamp.
Thank you, Speaker. This legislation prohibits adverse treatment of a public higher education student or employee for failing to assent to a divisive concept. It prohibits any requirement to adopt a specific ideology, political viewpoint to graduate, receive tenure, or a promotion.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you. I understand that, but this specific provision specifically says a student shall not be penalized or reverse any adverse treatment due to the student's refusal to believe or otherwise assent, meaning express agreement with one or more divisive concepts. And so you're not forcing them, you're just teaching them that racism exists and that some people in this world believe that one race or another is superior to another. And if you ask a student on an exam, does racism exist in this world or this country, and they say no, that's wrong. So can the professor not score against them on that exam on that question?
Leader Gamp.
Well, I believe that would fall under educational context, wouldn't it?
Representative Clemens.
Well, it certainly could fall under educational context, but your statute is clear and express as to whether or not that educational context is even allowed. So I think that's the fear that you're hearing communicated from some of my colleagues as to what is allowed to be taught and what is not allowed to be taught. And if we're going to refuse to allow professors to teach a subject simply because they can't then test a student on a fact that, in this instance, in my hypothetical, that some people believe that one race is superior to another, that's problematic. And that is certainly defeating the purpose of education in some regards. So that specific provision right there raises a real problem. And I think it's going to be a hamstring effect on what can be taught in our schools, because we don't want to deny our students the ability to be taught facts and the harsh realities of the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Gamp, you have anything else? Representative Warner.
Call for previous question, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Question's been called. Any objection? See no objection. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2670 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote. William, aye. There you
Ayes 67, 24 nay, 2 present, not voting.
House Bill 2670 on receipt of the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Resolution 133 by Chairman Farmer, a resolution approving the amendments and revisions to Tennessee Rules of Civil Procedure promulgated by the Supreme Court of Tennessee pursuant to provisions of Tennessee Code Annotated, Title 16, Chapter 3, Part 4.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of House Resolution 133.
Chairman Farmer moves adoption, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this does, this codifies the Tennessee Rules of Civil Procedure. This is something we do every year and helps our courts operate. So I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Resolution 133, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change your vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
House Resolution 133, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Resolution 134 by Chairman Farmer, a resolution approving the amendments and revisions to Tennessee Rules of Appellate Procedure promulgated by the Supreme Court of Tennessee pursuant to provisions Tennessee Code Annotated, Title 16, Chapter 3, Part 4.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of House Resolution 134.
Chairman Farmer moves adoption, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, same posture as last resolution. What this does, this codifies the rules of appellate procedure. I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Resolution 134, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays.
House Resolution 134, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2182 by Chairman Farmer and others relative to invoices of alcohol sellers. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2432.
Chairman Farmer moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2432 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2432 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Farmer moves passage of Senate Bill 2432 on third and final consideration. Call up second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this bill does, this is a reporting bill. This is brought to me by administration through the Department of Revenue. And what this does is it deletes a requirement that manufacturers of alcohol send in monthly invoices of what they've sold to the retailers, to the Department of Revenue. Revenue said, hey, look, we don't need this. If we need it, we can get it electronically. So that's what this does. And renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2432, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, 4 nays, 2 present, not voted.
Senate Bill 2432, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
And House Bill 2557 by Chair Lady Moody and others relative to education.
Chair Lady Moody, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2557 on third and final consideration.
Chair Lady Moody moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chair Lady Moody, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Moody renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2557, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 70, 21 nays, one present not voting.
House Bill 2557 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the regular calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Lear Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, it is that time of year when there are several bills that did not make the calendar for the committee that they need to be in this week because it is last calendar for many of our subcommittees. This next several announcements here and motions, I've conferred with the minority leader on it, and that's literally what these do. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move that House Bill 2774 be heard in the K through 12 subcommittee this week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objections, so ordered. Lear Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 2371 be heard in the Children and Family Affairs Committee subcommittee this week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Lear Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 1301 be heard in the Children and Family Affairs subcommittee this week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Lear Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 1912 be heard in the Education Instruction subcommittee this week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Lear Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this next motion deals with delayed bills. I think there'll be an announcement in a little bit on when that committee is going to be meeting. This motion does not predispose whether or not these bills come out of delayed bills. It just indicates what will happen if they do. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move that SJR 960 and SJR 967, if favorably considered by the Delayed Bills Committee, be heard in the Naming and Designating Committee this week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Lear Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that SJR 1147, if favorably considered by the Delayed Bills Committee, be heard in the State Government Committee this week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Members, we have some sponsor changes. Pursuant to Rule 52, I name Leader Camper as the first prime sponsor of House Bill 1973. Name Chairman Dixie as the first prime sponsor of House Bills 1947 and 1971. Name Representative Love as the first prime sponsor of House Bills 2109 and 2051. I name Representative Parkinson as the first prime sponsor of House Bill 1830. I name Representative Moody as the first prime sponsor of House Bill 2416. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please remember, members, that to register for the 48th Annual Tennessee Prayer Breakfast scheduled for Tuesday, March the 15th at 7 a.m., the Governor and the First Lady will join Chris Sanders, former Tennessee Titans player, and recording artist Riley Clemens, as well as other special guests, including Pastor Alan Jackson of World Outreach Church, for a time of prayer for our state. The breakfast will be back at Lipscomb University this year, and as in the past, shuttles will be provided for legislators. You'll receive an email today with details about the breakfast, and you will need to RSVP. I hope to see you all there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, join the Nashville Conference of State Legislators this Wednesday morning, day after tomorrow, between 8 and 9 a.m. in Conference Room 6B for coffee and donuts. Ben Williams and Wendy Underhill will be in Nashville conducting NCSL's annual state visit and would enjoy meeting all of you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Hicks of Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remind everyone that there's a reception tonight for the Home Builder Association of Tennessee at 7:15 at the Doubletree. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Brigham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tomorrow is Warren County Leadership on the Hill, and Representative Cheryl and I want to invite every one of you and your staff to Warren County Bologna Day on the 8th floor, starting at 11 o'clock. Warren County fried bologna and a lot of extras will be there. So
Thank you. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's kind of hard to come behind that baloney day. Members, we had a meeting after our last session, and the Seersucker Caucus voted to convene the Seersucker Caucus. And that convening is going to happen on March 24th. March 24th, the Seersucker Caucus will convene. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a reminder to members, you should have the information in your email inbox regarding budget appropriations, which will be due no later than March 14th. If you don't have information, then please check with my assistant and we'll make sure that you have what you need to put in your budget appropriation. Again, the deadline is March 14th. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the Delayed Bills Committee, that's the Delayed Bills Committee, will meet at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow in the Speaker's Conference Room. Delayed Bills, 8:30 a.m., Speaker's Conference Room tomorrow.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 92 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 9 a.m. on Thursday, March 10th, 2022.
Without objection, the House stands recessed till 9 a.m. on Thursday, March 10th, 2022.